I'm 72 years old, and I only recently admitted something I spent most of my life avoiding. I was never honest about who I was. Not with others, not even with myself. I don't say that with drama. It's not a revelation that struck like lightning. It came quietly, the way most truths do at this age. Sitting alone one evening, the house too quiet, realizing I didn't recognize the person my memories were about. I'm not telling this because I want forgiveness. I'm telling it because I don't have much time left, and this feels like something that should be said out loud before it's too late. Most days now are slow. I wake up early because my body insists on it. I make coffee I shouldn't be drinking, and I sit by the window longer than necessary. The street looks the same, but I don't feel part of it anymore. People pass by with places to be. I watch them go. When you get older, the noise of life fades, and what's left is your own voice. And if you spent decades ignoring it, that silence can be uncomfortable. For a long time, I told myself I was content, that I had done what was expected. That was the phrase I leaned on. What was expected? It sounded responsible, mature, safe. I grew up in a house where expectations were clear and feelings weren't discussed. My father believed in keeping things moving. Work, bills, appearances. My mother followed that rhythm. There wasn't cruelty, but there wasn't space either. You learn early in those homes how to become agreeable, how to read the room, how to adjust yourself until you fit. By the time I was in my 20s, I was very good at it. I had a job that sounded respectable when mentioned at family gatherings. I wore clothes that didn't draw attention. I laughed at jokes I didn't find funny. I nodded along in conversations where my mind was elsewhere. None of it felt wrong at the time. That's important to say. I wasn't miserable. I wasn't pretending in some dramatic sense. I just kept choosing the version of myself that caused the least friction. I told myself that was maturity. I married young. She was kind, steady, practical. We worked well on paper. We shared responsibilities. We made plans. We did what couples do when they're building a life they think will eventually feel like home. I remember sitting at the kitchen table late at night after work, both of us tired, eating quietly. I remember thinking this was adulthood. This was what people meant when they talked about settling down. What I didn't notice was how rarely we talked about anything real, how often I swallowed thoughts because they felt inconvenient, how often she did the same, I suspect. We weren't dishonest with each other, we just weren't honest either. Years passed like that, not in big leaps, but in small repetitions. Workdays, weekends, holidays that blurred together, conversations about groceries, repairs, schedules. I told myself there would be time later, time to explore, time to reflect, time to ask myself questions I didn't want to answer yet. There's a certain lie you tell yourself when you're younger, that life has chapters you can open when you're ready, as if they'll be waiting patiently. They don't. I had interests I never pursued because they didn't seem practical, opinions I softened because they might offend, dreams I laughed off because they didn't fit the life I was already living. People praised me for being reliable, for being steady, for being easy to work with. I accepted those compliments and wore them like a uniform. Inside, something was slowly shrinking. I didn't notice the cost right away. That's how it gets you. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as small discomforts you learn to ignore. And feeling of irritation that has no clear source. A sense of restlessness that you blame on age or stress. A quiet envy when you see someone living more freely, which you quickly dismiss as foolishness. I missed moments I can't get back. Not because I wasn't there physically, but because I wasn't present. I showed up, but I didn't arrive. My children remember me as dependable. I hear that word often now, dependable. I'm grateful, but it also stings. I wonder if they knew me, if I ever let them. I remember my daughter once asking me what I would do if I could start over. She was young. It was an innocent question. I gave her a practical answer, something about saving earlier, making smarter choices. I avoided the truth because I hadn't faced it myself. The truth was, I didn't know who I would be if I started over, and that frightened me. The years kept moving, careers change, bodies slow down, friends drift away. You don't notice the thinning of your circle until one day you look around and realize how quiet it's become. The turning point didn't come with drama, no grand event, just a series of small losses that piled up until I couldn't ignore the weight anymore. A colleague retired and moved away, a neighbor passed quietly in their sleep, my wife grew distant in ways we never addressed. Then she got sick. It wasn't sudden. It was the kind of illness that creeps in and takes its time. Doctor's visits, medications, adjustments, a gradual narrowing of life. Caring for someone strips away pretense. There's no room for the masks you've worn for years. You're confronted with raw moments, fear, vulnerability, silence. I sat by her bedside one afternoon listening to machines hum softly, and I realized how little of myself I had ever shared with her. Not because I didn't love her, I did in my way, but because I never learned how to be honest without feeling selfish. She passed quietly, holding my hand. I told her I loved her. I believe she knew. After the funeral, the house felt larger than it ever had. Rooms I once complained were too small now echoed. That's when the truth began to surface. Without roles to perform, without schedules to maintain, I was left with myself, and I didn't know what to do with him. I started sorting through old things, papers, photos, letters, traces of a life lived efficiently, carefully. I saw smiles that didn't reach my eyes, group photos where I stood slightly apart, achievements that looked impressive but felt hollow. I realized how much of my life had been spent responding rather than choosing. There are things that can't be fixed once you see them clearly. Conversations you can't have because the person is gone, paths you can't walk because your body won't allow it, versions of yourself that no longer exist. I can't go back and be braver. I can't undo the years I spent avoiding discomfort. I can't reclaim the energy of youth or the openness of possibility. That knowledge settles differently when you're old. It's not panic, it's a steady ache. If you're listening to this and you're younger than I am, I don't want to tell you what to do. I wouldn't trust advice delivered that way anyway. I just want to share what I learned too late. Being honest about who you are will cost you something. It might cost you approval. It might cost you comfort. It might cost you relationships that were built on expectations rather than truth. But not being honest costs more. It costs you yourself. Time doesn't announce when it's running out. It just keeps moving, indifferent to your plans. You don't wake up one day old. You wake up one day realizing you've been living on autopilot for decades. I used to believe that being needed was the same as being known. It isn't. I used to think that keeping the peace meant doing the right thing. Sometimes it just means avoiding the truth. Now my days are quieter. I speak less, I listen more, and I try, even now, to answer myself honestly when questions arise. There's a strange mix of gratitude and sorrow that comes with this stage of life. I'm thankful for what I had. I mourn what I never allowed myself to be. I don't know how much time I have left. None of us do. I know my pace is slowed. I know my memories come more easily than my plans. If this meant something to you, if it stirred a thought you've been pushing aside, sit with it for a moment. You don't have to act immediately, just don't ignore it. That's what I did, and I don't recommend it. I'm 72 now. I'm still learning how to be honest. I just wish I had started sooner.